This talk and the JavaScript for WordPress conference are brought to you by our sponsors at 10up and WP Buffs. 10up makes a better web with finely crafted websites and tools for content creators. Check out their junior and senior dev positions at 10up.com/careers. WP Buffs provides 24/7 fully managed support and white label agency services. Find out how they can help you focus on what you do best at wpbuffs.com/partnerships.
So yeah, first of all, I'm Julien. I'm from Nashville, North Carolina in the States. I've got Twitter if you want to follow me. I'm a technical director at Craft Peak. We make websites for craft breweries, actually. So I get to work in beer all day. Right now it's 5:05 my time, and so I think I'm just going to kind of dig right into it. One of the things that Christy mentioned was that I am a member of the Roots team. And so the one cool thing about this is that it kind of gives me some unique experience in the build tools realm, just because we have gone through Sage, which is the starter theme for WordPress. I don't know if any of you have any experience with it or have used it, but we've gone through using all of the build tools basically like imaginable. So Grunt and Gulp, and then now Webpack. So yeah, I thought this might be cool to cover just because I've got experience with all of them, as well as a bunch of different JavaScript libraries and stuff like that. So let me go back here and just show you guys. Let's talk about build processes. So in the console, like if I wanted to open up even this website right here, say like this web, turn my console off, and I can make this a little bit bigger, but you could see like, I can do anything that I want in here. So like bar hello, and then I can know what this is, but you're going to be writing JavaScript that's always much more complicated than this. So this isn't going to help. And then when you really have to write a bunch of JavaScript or a bunch of scripting for your site, you're going to have to compile everything and make sure you have everything else you need and import different files. And then now with React and all the new like Gutenberg blocks and stuff like that, we actually need like an entire build process, to minify, and pull in things from, everywhere else in the site and other libraries that we're using. So for that, we use a build process. And originally, some existing build processes might have been like make or some other ones. But I think the big trend started happening when we looked into Grunt. And this is kind of like a little graphic that I had of like simple web projects. Like in a really simple web project, you can have like an HTML page, and then I can call like a CSS or like an image, and then also like a JavaScript file, right? And then execute kind of similarly to how I showed you in the console. But this is like modern web projects now. We have all these JavaScript files, all these CSS files, images, like vendor files and stuff that we need, libraries, like I mentioned. So for that, again, like you've got to have a build process because we've got to take it from this to this. And Grunt's the first one that really started taking off, I think, especially in the WordPress community. Let me see if I can like show you a good example of Grunt. All of these things are going to be ran in the terminal. So you would say like Grunt build or Gulp build or Webpack build, and that's all going to use Node on the back end. And for those who don't know, Node is like backend. It's just JavaScript in the back end. So like again, I can do this bar hello like this. And then if I type hello back out, it shows me hello. So like this is the interactive console. So under the hood, Grunt, Gulp, and Webpack all use Node in the backend. So just to kind of show that off, but let's go to the original Grunt file. I mean, I'm going to kind of assume that we all have experience with these, but the reason why I'm trying to go through the evolution is because in the WordPress world, you're still going to see Grunt files. We've got a lot of plugins that use it to build their assets for their JavaScript and for their CSS. And overall, it does still work. It's very declarative. So you can kind of see the config here is like, and this might make a little bit of sense. Like, oh, look, global. So jQuery. So like make sure jQuery is global. Or watch for these certain files or these certain things, and then run these tasks when they need to be fired off. So if I go here and just show you, this is the Sage grunt file from probably 3 years ago, but I think it's kind of cool to pull it up because you can see the evolution of these projects. And the other cool thing is that, this really does still work. So if you're stuck on a library or using a plugin or contributing to a plugin that uses grunt, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world, and it's totally fine. I think that, just keep in mind that this is an older technology, but it's still being used, and with older versions of Node and stuff like that, it can totally still work. I'm just double checking that I'm all good on this here. So if you look here, this is kind of, I'll explain what this is doing. I don't need to explain like this stuff up here, but we're just basically showing like, we're going to use these things. This is an older JavaScript syntax like this require and stuff like that, but we'll explain it kind of later as you see things go through. So what we've done here is we have like this list of files, and this is like files that we're going to be, let's see, this is the list of files that we're going to be like configuring and kind of building into like one bundle. And then this is the config for grunt. So, I mean, it's pretty declarative. Like it makes sense how this is laid out. We're using JS hint for hinting at the JavaScript. These lines here say like, we're going to hint JS, but we're not going to hint these two files. This here says, oh, we got less. This is from when Roots used less and Bootstrap used less. So like we have this dev here for the development environment and then build for the production environment. Actually, really quick, let me just stop and make sure this is, I'm going to switch over. Can everybody see my screen? I'm in track to see my text. If it needs to be bigger, like leave a plus react or something like that. Yeah, okay, good, okay, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Thanks, yeah, appreciate it. And let's see if I can bump this up to maybe 20. Okay, is this better? Because I'm going to be showing off a lot of code examples. So, sorry, I don't have two screens because I'm in an office right now. Or in a code space. This is, I think this is better. Okay, cool. So, and as we're showing this off, I can just kind of keep walking through these. But basically, like, this is very declarative. You have these original files, and then these files are going to compile down into one smaller file that's usually like minified and also transpiled is what it's called, but basically going to be like built so that older or certain versions of browsers can like be supported.
Hey Julian, sorry to interject, but can you do us all a favor and zoom in a little bit? Make that text a little bit larger. Yep.
Yeah, sure. Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out. Let's see. Is that better?
Cool. That looks great.
Is this good? Okay, awesome. Killer. Okay, great. So again, like the reason why I'm showing this all off is because I want to get kind of an idea of like, we have these files right here, these JavaScript files. And you can see like, here's the main JavaScript file. There's nothing in here right now because this is blank, but you can see this. And then in here, you should be able to see where we're pulling this in right here. Assets, plugins, JS, and assets, JS. So this is kind of like where this is all coming from. So what we're doing is we're grabbing these things, and then we're going to output one small file, and that'll be output to dist. You can kind of see here. So again, we're going to use in grunt, you kind of put everything together in the config together. So you're seeing like, these are our less files. This is our concatenation. This is uglify settings. Uglify, like it's the one that's going to like minify everything and kind of scrunch it all together so that it's really small file size wise. Auto prefixer, that's going to help CSS like be turned into like the CSS that's available for whatever browser. This has kind of been dropped in favor of post CSS that processor. So we'll go over that when I can show you that in Webpack. I don't want to spend too long on the grunt file, but I do want you to understand, this is kind of how things have been done, and it does still kind of work. I don't really use grunt anymore, but these things can be used. And, here you can kind of see, like, basically it's just an object. It's just like a big collection of these settings, this config. And so if I scroll down, you can see all the settings. Watch here. Here's the settings for watch, like watch these less files, watch these JavaScript files. Live reload. We have live reloading with, this used to be with live reload, and now we use something else called browser sync. But you can see the register task here. We're going to register the task, default, dev, and build. And so what we're doing is we're telling, so like, for example, in register task build, it's going to run all of these builds. And then you can see, like, it's going to run less build and auto prefixer build. And you can see that the config for this has actually been kind of like defined here. So less here, and then build. So the one thing that I really liked about Grunt is that it was very straightforward. I think as I show you over Grunt and Gulp and Webpack, you're going to see, I think things have actually gotten a little bit more complicated, but there are reasons for it. And if you need to start with Gulp, again, like I'm sorry, with Grunt, again, I'm not sure I could super recommend it because it's kind of outdated, but it is definitely something that you're going to come across in the wild in the WordPress world, and some plugins just aren't using any of the newer ones yet. So this is why I wanted to show this and point this out. Okay, so what our build tools do, and again, this is kind of a good example, but let's see here. I'm just trying to find there it is. Again, what these build tools are doing is they're taking all of these files that we have and they're compiling them into one simple file. So let me show you Gulp as an example, kind of different than Grunt. I'm going to switch over to the Gulp file, and it needs examples, specific examples of every single plugin that Gulp uses. So for example, you can kind of see here's less there's our less plugin. And this is all installed via like node modules. So this is our less plugin. This is our CSS nanofier, which like makes the CSS smaller. This is the Sass compiler. So like this is when we had Sass enabled, and you could write Sass. The cool thing with this Gulp file is that you could write less and Sass if you needed to. So let's just say you had a plugin that used Sass, but you also wrote your stuff in less. You could do that. So like Bootstrap and something else. And so the nice thing is that, you can use these tools kind of in conjunction to then build one file, one end result. I'm going to scroll down here and you can kind of see, this is actually something very complicated that I'm not going to have time to explain, but this is an asset builder that was built specifically for Sage. So I'm going to keep scrolling down here and you can just see here's a config here. And globs are kind of like a collection of certain types of files. So like all the JavaScript would go into a glob, all the CSS would go into a glob, etc. The Sage Gulp file is actually like pretty complicated. So this is an example of kind of where you can kind of see the file is like a lot longer here. And then the other cool thing is that because it's just JavaScript, we're just writing JavaScript here. Like here's a variable, here's some information. Because these build processes are built just in JavaScript, you can kind of obfuscate some code and put them in other places. So one cool example is that we actually made it so that the Gulp file stayed the same, but everything was defined, like the config was defined in this manifest file. So you could see here, this is kind of showing our entry points, files, main.js. Here in CSS, we're saying like main.js is going to, sorry, let me back up here. The main.js file, its dependencies are here. And so main.js would use anything in these. And I know that I can't really zoom in very far, but you can see this is the scripts folder here. For the CSS, right here, you can see that comes from the styles here. And so see, it says styles main.css. So it would grab any styles in here. Let me go back to the manifest. The customizer, we had our own customizer style, scripts for JavaScript for like the quick reloading and not having to reload the page every time the customizer. So there was that as well. And then there's also a separate file, jQuery. And that was just because we were compiling our own version of jQuery. That's been dropped in favor of using WordPress's jQuery. But let me make all of these smaller, and you can kind of see the end goal is that this would generate 4 files: main JavaScript, main CSS, customizer JavaScript, and the jQuery JavaScript. So again, this is all kind of like gonna take a bunch of files, combine them, know how to do that, minify them, make them smaller, make them better, and then split them out into one file. I hope that makes sense. So let's see. So with the gulp file, again, I'm going to go back to this gulp file. Oh, sorry. And I'm just going to kind of show you, so you can see like this is basically our settings, like our config, and we've broken it out. Unlike in the gulp file where it was all in one, or grunt file when it was all in one. Now here is the gulp file. Again, I'm not going to go completely through this, but you see the CSS tasks here. This is using gulp's pipes. So this is the cool thing that Grunt introduced, and Grunt and gulp is so hard for me to like remember to go between them. But this is the cool thing that gulp introduced that I really liked over Grunt, although it took a second to get a hold of. Gulp used an idea called pipes, and basically what pipes were is, or what pipes are, is essentially like, if you can kind of imagine using these files as plumbing. So like it's almost like you're taking these files and putting them into a pipe, and then the files kind of flow and can be transformed and kind of like modified or like filtered or like passed on to other pipes. So it uses this very friendly dot syntax where, you know, you can write like this chainability, if you would. So you can kind of chain these things on. So this pipe is one thing that I really like. So we have this couple functions for like source maps, and if less, we pipe the less through, we pipe the sass through, we pipe the concatenation. This is the gulp concat plugin. We pipe auto prefixer again because post CSS wasn't being used at this point, and then you can pass it these these options here. So we're basically saying like pipe auto prefixer. Here's the options. Pass it these options. I think you guys could probably all agree with me. This does look a little bit more confusing than gulp, or grunt. Sorry, like I think it was funny how gulp started looking more confusing than grunt, but it was really fast, and it was I think a little bit more powerful. And then once I got used to this pipe syntax, I think it was nice to use. I think it was nicer to use. The thing about gulp is that it really it wasn't adopted by WordPress Core, and they opted to use Grunt. So while it was faster, maybe better, I think a lot of these options were kind of ditched, and we didn't really use gulp so much. So I don't want to spend too much longer on it, but one thing I would recommend checking out is, if you'd like to check it out, you can actually, I'll share my slides here after we're done, and you can see the original build files for the Grunt for Sage. And again, this is applicable because it's a real theme. It's like a real library that works. You can see the build file for Sage with gulp. And then now I'm going to talk a little bit more about Webpack and why it's been used and stuff. So, you know, we had all of these different options, and we had these build files that minified all these files and then spit them out, right? And they spit them out smaller. They can concatenate it and make sure that it can be used in different browsers, all that good stuff. So now what I think we should talk about is Webpack, because this is kind of the future on top of Webpack being the future. It's really fast, and WordPress has adopted it in the core JavaScript compiling. So I actually want to show you, Gutenberg is a great example to look at. But if you look at Gutenberg, Gutenberg has, dependencies. We have these things that we need. We have these things that we need to look at, and all these JavaScript files that need to be compiled, and all these libraries that we use. Those are used like within the package JSON. And you can see this is a lot of libraries that are being used. And you can see them as dev dependencies that we have Webpack in here. So if I go into, sorry, it's not on Webpack. There's one specific file. Sorry, this Webpack config JSON. And this is a great example to look at Gutenberg's own Webpack config, because this has a really great example of, using plugins, using these things. So I would say check that one out. But right now, we're going to go back and just talk about Webpack for 1 second. So we're going to talk about how Webpack works here. This is another classic example, just so you can see, again, the idea of what these build process is and what these build process tools do. They take all these files, and again, you're kind of seeing like handlebar templates and JavaScript and Sass and CSS, and these image types. And then Webpack takes all of them. And the cool thing about Webpack is it's very aware of every file type and what it should do with it. But at the end of the day, it's just JavaScript. So you're writing JavaScript to help transform and concatenate and compile all these build files. So you can see it right here in this example. This is what Webpack does. Webpack makes a dependency graph. And this is what makes it different from some of the other build tools, is it actually is pretty aware of what every single package needs and how to resolve that properly. So, and when I say package, I mean like, what are the libraries that you require? For example, Gutenberg is going to be using React, and other libraries might use Vue, or your project might use jQuery or Lodash or underscores. So Webpack can be aware of not only the files that you have, but the type of the files that they are. So whether it's JavaScript or whether it's an image or whether it's HTML even, Webpack can be aware of those things and kind of arrange them appropriately. So if we're all kind of catching on here, this is a really funny example of a dependency graph. Don't pay any attention to it, but this is kind of what Webpack's doing in the back end. It's listing everything that we need, and it's finding how they're related to each other, and then it's going to help resolve it. So let's talk about these core concepts in Webpack. Webpack has a couple of these. There's really just 4. There's an entry, and this is basically where do we grab these codes to add to the bundles. Okay, so where do we grab? And a bundle is just the final product here. So where do we grab the top level code and add it to these bundles? This is the exact same thing as what I just showed you in the Gulf or the Grunt file, where you show like the entry point, like the original files. Maybe it was that main JS or the main CSS. The output is also, you have to tell Webpack where to put the stuff once it's done. So you tell Webpack, okay, all the images need to be, optimized and all that stuff. But then when you're done, throw it in the images folder. Same thing with JavaScript. Same thing with CSS. You can say, hey, Webpack, take these 5 CSS files and turn them all into one called main.css or main.min.css. Webpack also has loaders. And so what Webpack loaders do is they transform these dependencies, again, these entries. So just it transforms these files that we give it into JavaScript so that Webpack can bundle them. So if we're passing an image into a Webpack file, let's just say we want to minify all of our images as build processes, Webpack needs to understand what that is. So its loader is basically like a driver so that Webpack can understand that there's an image and what the file is, and then can kind of transform it into JavaScript so that it knows what to do with it, and then it can spit them back out in the proper way. Plugins are the last bit to Webpack, and they transform bundles of code and ask outputs before their output. So it's kind of like the end result. Once you're done fully building, they can kind of transform those final things and do stuff to them. So for example, Like maybe we want to concatenate everything, or we want to minify everything, or we want to change every single instance of the word hello to goodbye. A plugin could potentially be written to do that. So let's talk about these entry points really quick. These entry points are going to be CSS files, image files, JavaScript files, vendor files. Think really quick. If I can just make this text really big, this is the Gutenberg one. And you can actually see here's these loaders here. And you can see we're showing some things here, but you can see this asset style sheet, SAS loader right here. And this is our include pest, and this is actually what we're giving them. So this is kind of like one of our entry points. This is a little confusing because it's split out into all these different big files, but you can see here's an output right here. So Webpack gives this idea of, you just have a file, you give Webpack this file, it figures out what to do with it, and then it spits it out where it's supposed to go. So here's our entry points again, and those bits that are highlighted right here are the actual entry points. So all of these things that our library needs. Outputs is that final one. And actually, you wouldn't probably do it in a WordPress project, but maybe in a single web application, you might not even have any files other than an HTML file with a little bit of JavaScript. Maybe you're using a Webpack loader that actually takes SAS and transforms it into like inline styles or those kind of things. So the cool thing with Webpack is it can be really flexible as to where your code goes. Loaders are, like I mentioned, this is what's going to actually help Webpack understand what these things are. And Webpack only understands JavaScript again, so it's going to allow us to use them. And these are defined, or at least were defined in some older versions of Webpack by test, which is basically like, hey, tell me all the files that I need, entry points, and then use. And then use is a loader package that you need. Those loader packages are installed in your package.json. So Webpack by itself is just a library that is aware of the things you give it and knows how to spit them out. It uses these loaders, which you install and use with your package.json. And it uses these loaders to understand this stuff. So in this example from the documentation, it takes the CSS and it says use the CSS loader, and that helps it understand it. This here is a TypeScript file, and then it says use the TypeScript loader. Sorry. Plugins, the final piece. Just now that we've kind of gone over them, I think this is a really good example. They can really do anything because now, because of these loaders, right? Plugins are just really processing JavaScript. So an image has been turned into JavaScript. So here's a really cool example. This SVG Sprites Webpack plugin is a really cool one. For example, what you can do is you can give it SVGs and you can tell it, hey, go and grab a bunch of SVGs, and it'll actually take it all and put it into a sprite and then update everything. So plugins can do crazy stuff. ImageMin is another plugin that can be used, and that can be used to optimize your PNGs, optimize your JPEGs, stuff like that, but during the build process. I know we're talking about JavaScript building, but we've got images, our themes and our plugins and all of those things have images and CSS, and they have styles, and they have SVGs, and they have other stuff that we can't even imagine. So that's why I'm covering everything. Webpack can do a lot. On top of all of these things, Webpack has an understanding of hot module replacement. So we can actually, instead of completely reloading the page, Webpack can actually inject new JavaScript, new styles, and other things right into the web page. This is obviously depending on your configuration, but it's totally possible. Webpack can also do code splitting. So you can split up your code automatically based on when you will need it. So let's just say you're wanting to load the first little bit of the page, and then you want to load the rest of the page. You can actually do that. You can have Webpack be smart enough. One really cool example is that loading the above the fold content only, Webpack can understand, okay, here's all the JavaScript, here's all the CSS. Webpack can use a plugin to run a super smart like headless browser, see the styles that you need, go grab those styles, go grab that stuff. I mean, it's absolutely outstanding. Using it with WordPress specifically, we have a little bit of limitations, but let's just say you're building a JavaScript only app where WordPress is the backend. You're going to use Webpack to do your compiling, and that's a single page app. And so at that point, a single page app can be like spun up in that headless web browser in your terminal during your build process and analyzed, and you can use plugins and loaders to kind of work in conjunction to build these things and optimize your site and your site delivery. So Webpack can be really, really powerful there too. Tree shaking is also a really cool example, and it's making sure that you're only using what you need. If you're using like modern libraries, like let's just say Lodash or like another modern JavaScript library as your dependencies in your project, Webpack can make sure that you only need the code, like only have the code that you need. So for example, like right now, when we load Java jQuery on every page in WordPress, you can use any jQuery function. But let's just say you only used a couple jQuery functions. You don't need the rest of those. Tree shaking can do that all automatically. I know we're going through a lot, but this is kind of how I'm trying to make sure we can get through some of this stuff. I'm not actually done. What I want to do is I want to show you. Oh, and actually, Zach wanted me to mention Parcel. This is kind of like a new kid on the block. It's, calls itself a blazing fast zero configuration web application bundler. It looks really cool. The syntax looks super easy to use. I think that it's really great for all of those things. But I just want to say, I haven't personally used it, and because Webpack is kind of the direction that Sage has gone and the direction that Gutenberg has gone, the direction that WordPress Core has gone, I'm going to keep recommending Webpack to be used. So let me just go through the Webpack file, and then if I have some time, I want to make sure that we can get to Mix, which is my personal favorite. For those, if you're on the Slack, I do have it open in my phone. I'm just trying to double check, make sure that we're doing well. If you need me, or if you have a specific question for me, we can either hold it to the end, or you can just make sure to tag me so that my phone lights up so I can see it. And hope you can hear the French in the background. Okay, so let's see. Let me get to the last bit here. This is a Sage Webpack configuration file. So again, this is a real usable Webpack configuration, but I also want to recommend, just say that it's pretty complicated. But let's go through this. So I think if we're from the JavaScript world, we're all probably available. But first, I actually have a question coming in from Christoph. The question for Webpack: how can we separate the JavaScript and the Sass to CSS? Okay, so it's a really good question. I think we're going to cover this here in just a minute. So let's see here. Where was I? So this is a Webpack file. I know that the text is really big, so this is bigger than normal. But what we're going to do is, I think we're all probably available with comfortable with what a package JSON is. But just in case you're not, let me just go back and cover. Again, all of these things use Node in the backend, and again, Node is going to be that tool that we use in the backend, either of our console or of our project, and we can run it right from here. And this is just JavaScript. So var hello equals hello, like a string here. If I print it out, we're using this engine in the back end of our computer in the terminal. This is what the build processes actually use. So you can see here, Node uses npm, the package manager, which allows us to find things that we need and then grab them. So you can see here the name of that file. And a package JSON basically just says, hey, here's the things that we need. Can you go grab them? It tells NPM that. And you can see here our dev dependencies: auto prefixer, browser sync, cache loader, CSS nano, node Sass, the Sass loader, Webpack here itself is a dev dependency. I'm showing off a version from example from version 3, and then you can also see these dependencies here: Bootstrap, jQuery, and tooltip library called Popper. This is what kind of comes with Sage by default. So you can see this here. In this package.json, because we have all of these things that we need, auto prefixer, cache loader, CSS loader, you're seeing all this stuff, post CSS loader here, node sass here. Okay, this is telling us that we need these things. This way, now we can grab them in Webpack. And in Webpack, let's see, actually, can you guys still hear me? Or, and I've got a couple questions. I'm actually going to hold these until the end here. 1 second. Yeah, okay. Let me just read through these. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna talk about this in a minute. Thanks, Remy. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about this in a second. So in this Webpack config, do you see how we're using require Webpack right here? And then we have like Webpack merge. We have this clean plugin. We have the styling and globs. This is going to be using these things from the package. Package. So styling again. Styling, node sass, all of that stuff. So yeah, give me 1 second. So here in the Webpack config, we can actually see what we're pulling in, like what loaders that we're using. And again, this is from the package.json. So this is the things that we need. One thing, just so you can know, the VS Code editor is really helpful. It actually knows that the copy globs plugin comes from my package.json. And in here, it can actually tell me this wrapper around this library. So it can give me examples in here to the libraries. So, and sorry, give me just 1 second. It was not busy when I came out here. Now it is. So you can also see here in the Webpack config, we're grabbing these things that we need. So like, hey, we need Webpack. We need this clean plugin. We need this copy globs plugin. We need these file names. And we can just, again, this is just normal JavaScript that we're just writing and putting it in kind of key value pairs here. So this Webpack config is pretty complicated, but you can see some of these things might look familiar. You can see this output, but this also might look familiar too. We have this config that we defined right here, and we're requiring this local file, and that is this config.js. So while I'm going to show you the Webpack config, I'm also going to show you how we've kind of, like the Sage team has kind of made it so that the Webpack config can be used in a lot of different projects, and you can change the config as needed. So, but you might see here, this is the output where we're telling Webpack to output something. We're saying grab this value from the config file, and I'm going to keep them both open. I'll show you in a minute. This is our public path, which is like where our final files are going to be kind of spit out. And then also we have some other options. Now, Webpack has this module thing, which kind of tells you, what modules that you should use and how to figure it out. So right here, again, we're using this test in our loader, and we're saying, hey, look for JavaScript files, include things from here, and use ESLint. Here again, we're going to say, like, look for the JavaScript and CSS and Sass. This is some crazy regex, but again, use this loader. In this JavaScript, we're going to exclude node modules, Bootstrap, Foundation, stuff like that. But again, look for JavaScript and use the cache loader. And keep scrolling down. So again, we've got all these files, and Webpack can kind of be really aware of what we need to do and when we need to do it. Here, we're going to be testing for CSS, like CSS files. And you can see right here, we're using an extract text plugin that takes the CSS and turns it in, but while like turns it into the final compiled CSS. But while we're using that, you can actually see we have this cache loader. There's a car. We have this cache loader. We have this CSS loader. We have this post CSS loader. So we're basically saying, hey, we have all of these files. We have all these files, and you're going to use all of these loaders to do what you need. Again, here we've got a test for an SCSS file, like a SAS file, and then we're actually going to be using that here with the loaders here. This is a test for fonts. So it goes on and on. Like we're testing for fonts, and we're saying go here. We're testing for this. We're saying go here. This is where we do our resolving. I want to mention this is an external jQuery. We're kind of assuming that jQuery is going to be loaded and not bundled in from Webpack. That tells Webpack, hey, you don't have to go look for jQuery. You don't have to try and find jQuery. It's right there in the externals right there. Plugins. Again, we talked about what plugins do, and they're going to go in at the last minute and do what they need to do. We're using a clean plugin, a copy globs plugin, extract tech, the extract text, loaders. I mean, the style lint plugin. So again, like this is a complicated Webpack config, but the idea is you can see that what Webpack is doing is it's taking it and it's making everything smaller. The config here is pretty cool because you know what we can do is we can kind of say like, you know, what do we need? So what are we going to copy, and what are we going to, how are we going to set things? These things are kind of a little complicated. So I think another good example would be to go to a Webpack config that doesn't have it, such as Gutenberg's, and just look like here in this output again. We have this output and we have this file name. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to illustrate the fact that our build tools have always existed to do, you know, basically this one task, which is to take all these big files and spit them out into smaller ones. Webpack is the one you guys should be using, and it's what I'd recommend. So really quick before I get to the to the questions, I definitely want to cover something called Mix, because Mix is a really cool Webpack like abstraction, and it's not like, oh yeah, here we are putting crap on top of crap. It's maintained by a really cool team. So if you have ever heard of Laravel, I think it can be really, really helpful to look at, you know, code from outside the WordPress world. Laravel's a really cool PHP framework, and some people from the Laravel community have actually made Laravel Mix. Laravel Mix. And I'm going to show you an actual example because I think it's really, really, really easy to explain once I show this to you. But if I go to GitHub and I show you Laravel Mix, it's they call it a wrapper around Webpack for the 80% use case. I really have found that it's extremely flexible and extremely easy to set up. And the cool thing is that it makes it really easy to define build steps for Webpack. And it's not just for your Laravel application. You can use it in WordPress, and it's actually what we use at my company, because I really like that, you know, other people are maintaining it and making sure that it works as Webpack stays updated and stuff like that. I think it's really cool to see it kind of grow, and, you know, all of my stuff keeps working as Webpack makes changes and updates and all of that. If I update Mix, I know that Mix is going to be working because so many people use it. I mean, look at that, 2 million downloads. So as the last bit, you can see how complicated this is. This is actually just our config file, but this is our Webpack config file. It's 217 lines long. I'm going to show you really quick my Mix file because it's called webpack.mix.js. And this is the only thing I need to require in my file here. We're actually requiring Laravel Mix, and Laravel Mix will require all the things that it needs. Some of these things are just fixes and for versioning. This is like a personal Webpack file that I wanted to show, or a Mix file that I wanted to show you. But the cool thing about Mix is really seriously, all I needed to do was add it to my package.json. And you can see right, let's see, where's Mix? You can see right here, I'm requiring mix, Laravel mix right here. And it's basically taking care of the most of this for me. I do have some other things figured and added in the library here. So let me go back to this mix file so you can see it. I have this require Laravel mix right here. We're setting our public path, and this is just telling us this is where our public path, like we're basically saying like when we're done with all of our files, put them in this folder, like a dist folder. I can do things like copy. It's so easy. Like I have to copy the Bootstrap files over for another reason, actually for server-side compiling. But you can actually see right here, mix.copy. It's it. It's done. And then you can also extend a normal Webpack config very easily. So you can you might recognize externals and using jQuery as an external. This is all I had to do to get it to use jQuery as an external. And then also I can use these extra modules. I have this web font loader because we use web font loader. And then I also have another one here so that we can use list.js and so that we can use web font. We can use web font globally. And what I want to show you now is I think I can make my text bigger here. And I should be able to go to, actually just going to show you. Actually see here, I'm in my themes directory. And in here, I can actually go in and do anything I need. So for example, like I could go in here in this theme, and all I would have to do is run like this command right in package.json right here. So webpack run, or sorry, npm run dev, and it's going to run this. And all we're telling it to do is we're telling Laravel mix to run. It's really simple. It's really simple showing this Laravel mix. And I just want to show you how simple it is to get set up. You can see this documentation here in the README. And I'm just going to show you, like, for example, their basic example is really basic, but this is seriously all you need. So let's just say we just want to get JavaScript with ES6, ES 2015, and Sass. Boom. That's it. It's really that easy. It's that easy. So I really highly recommend looking at their documentation. Okay, so now I know I only have a couple more minutes left. I think what I'd like to do is, can we make me more the main thingy? Thank you so much. Sorry for the hustle bustle going on behind me. I hope you can still hear me. I'm going to look through these Slack questions really quick. And thank you so much for putting the links in there. If anybody really wants a mixed config, I'm happy to use one. I've passed that, or happy to pass one off. So I'm going to go up from the top and just talk about a couple of the questions that I've got. I hope that was helpful, at least a little bit, just covering some of those things. Okay. So the first question was, how can we separate JavaScript and the Sass files? And basically, I think I'm going to take that question as, how do we separate our JavaScript files and our Sass files? Those two things are two different entries. So we tell Webpack, hey, for the JavaScript files, you're going to spit this out. And we tell Webpack, hey, for the Sass files, you're going to use a loader. And then you're going to use that loader to transform it into CSS. And then you're going to spit it out there. And that can be done a bunch of different ways in Webpack. In Mix, again, it's just as easy as this. We say, hey, for the Sass, this is where you need to grab it from, and this is the folder you need to put it in. And for the JavaScript right here, this is going to be the JavaScript file that you need to grab, and this is going to be the folder that you need to put it in. So really simple. Webpack is a little more complicated, but Webpack 4 is a lot easier to use and very fast. So I hope that makes that example. I've got another one here. With bundling of vendor libraries in the final, isn't there a risk of conflicts and unnecessary file size? Yes, this is super important question, and I appreciate it. I know that it was kind of answered, but the correct answer is definitely using externals. And again, with externals, I showed an example in my code that you can see using Laravel Mix or using Webpack externals. That can be done. Please, 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 please. Like, for example, if you don't need to use, let's just say you're building something in WordPress and you're going to put React on the front end, but you don't, but like React is being used by another library or something like that. Mark it as an external. Make sure that it's globally used. Obviously, you could run into issues of running different versions of different things. But other than that example, I think that, please use these libraries provided by WordPress. If you're doing a WordPress project, you can absolutely use WP and QScript. I'm going to throw up an example. Sorry. Wow. I'm going to throw up an example, but there's an example of me and Zach did a workshop at WordCamp Europe, and it was really, really great because we were able to use so many libraries provided by WordPress by default. So people are asking me, is using Mix better? Personally, yes, I think it's the best thing I've found. It's not necessarily as fast as a personalized, fine-tuned Webpack config. If you really spend a couple hours getting it exactly for your project, I think you could get Webpack to be quicker. But overall, Mix works, and it works for my entire team. And all I have to do is run npm install or yarn install, and everybody has everything they need. And I think that's the best part about Mix, is that because it's maintained by a library about a lot of people, or a library used by a lot of people, Laravel, and a very good dev community, I would always highly recommend Mix. I do want to say I really think it's important to think about the underlying technology. So maybe try to write a little quick or small Webpack config. Or you can always check out this externals and using Gutenberg's config. The other thing I wanted to show you is I'm going to show you Zach Gordon has a GitHub library. And sorry, I know that I'm going to just post this into the Slack here. Let's see, that Gutenberg course has a thing there as well. So I know that my time's up. Somebody asked, where am I? So I'm just going to go back here. I am in Lyon. I'm in France. It's the last bit. I've been traveling for 5 weeks around WordCamp Europe, and I'm just going to show you. There we are. So I think that's it, Christy. That's probably all my time. I appreciate that. I hope that was helpful. Sorry if it was a little scattered. I wanted to cover a lot. Sorry, I just saw another question come in. If you're still using Gulp, but you find Webpack really frustrating, please give Mix a try. I think it's been really cool. The other suggestion would be feel free to check out the Sage build file, although I will say it's quite advanced, and it is a little faster than the default Mix one that I use, but I really have enjoyed using Mix, and I think it's really easy to wrap your head around.
Thanks for watching this talk from the JavaScript for WordPress conference. If you're interested in more talks like this, head over to javascriptforwp.com/conference to see an archive of all talks, as well as information about upcoming events.